Okay, just bear with me for a second. Imagine you're just a normal person with a 9-to-5, regular life, all that good stuff. You start creating Pokemon card videos on YouTube, people start watching them, and it's super fun, and like 99% of people are super, super positive and nice to you. But twice a day, your phone rings with a notification, and it says, "What app do you use to price your cards?" Okay, I love that people are interested in the information, but I'm a little bit bored of getting this notification. So I'm just gonna make this video, and then now no one ever has to ask this question, what app or website do you use to price cards? I'm gonna tell you everything, English, modern, vintage, Japanese, graded cards. I'm gonna go through everything I use and that I've seen other people in my local TCG community using. So let's dive in. So the first one is for English, ungraded, modern cards, and maybe lower end vintage. You should be using TCGPlayer. TCGPlayer is owned by eBay, but it's a very, very active market. There are a lot of sales there, and most people are going to essentially reference TCGPlayer for market prices. So when we're looking at a card like this one, the Bubble Mew, you can make sure you find the exact right card just through the search. The search function's pretty good. And then under filters here, you can choose the condition, right? Especially for modern cards, usually you're not gonna have a lot of variety, but we're looking for near mint copies of this. Initially, ignore this direct by TCGPlayer. That is not the market price, and it is sometimes way above market price. So we wanna scroll down to market price and see that $169.99 as of today. And you can look at this chart and how it's changed over time. So obviously Bubble Mew's had a huge, huge jump recently, but it's really leveled out. I actually thought by now it would probably have dropped, but it's actually leveled out and pretty stable around 170. So that's the current market value of this card. You could scroll through listings down here. Sometimes you can look at like the TCGPlayer low verified. So verified meaning that little star there. So card crash with that star and multi-thousands of sales. That's gonna be so your first verified or kind of legitimate listing. And that's $168.50, which is very close to the market price. On things that don't sell as often as this Bubble Mew, you might see that the TCGPlayer low is a little bit lower than market price. One of the reasons I recommend looking at the TCGPlayer verified low is that sometimes a card is moving down in price actively, and the listings can be an indication of that. If you see a lot of very legit TCGPlayer sellers are kind of undercutting each other. So maybe the market price is 170, but then you see a bunch of listings around 150. 150 is probably the direction that card is heading, so it doesn't hurt to take a look at that. Another thing you can look at is click view more data and look at recent sales of this card. Another really, really useful data point. At the end of the day, for a lot of this stuff, except for very, very, very rare cards, the price that someone's like listing or selling something for is not necessarily the market price, right? It has to actually be selling for that price. So we could see here, these sales are pretty consistently sort of in the 167 to 179 range. So that's how you get that 170. That looks like about market price with recent solds, potentially even trending up over that 170 number. Okay, so let's move on to talking about high-end ungraded vintage. So we're talking like gold stars, shinings, those kinds of cards. So ungraded cards that are over 10 years old, worth a few $100s or a few $1,000s in some cases. For this, highly recommend eBay last solds. It's pretty much the only way available to you to comp cards like this. So you're gonna start by looking up the card, and then I would probably recommend for ungraded, actually just checking no under graded in the filters. And we're also gonna, under the filters, you gotta scroll way down to sold items. You're gonna hit sold items and then search. So now we're looking at the most recent solds. There's about four in the last month. So there's a pretty good precedent here that this card is worth somewhere between $400 and $650. I actually think this first one here is my own listing. It is, it's my own listing. So I'm in some part setting the market. I have one of the highest sales. It was a little under that. I accepted a best offer. It was $600. So very similar to this, we're gonna look at some of these other ones. The thing I would recommend is to look at the condition here, right? So looking at this Trico, you know, some whitening, it's listed as LP. Actually, the back looks great. This is a pretty good vintage high-end card. So when we look at something like that, let's look at this cheaper one. I'm gonna guess it's in worse condition just because of the price. Yeah, it's got some bends in the corners. It's not too bad, but it's definitely worse, right? Like you would, yeah, the scratching and stuff, you would call this mod play. So it's definitely worse than that other card. And that's pretty much it. That's what I would recommend for vintage high-end singles. Have the eBay app and just get in the habit of filtering for sold and completed items. Go by ended recently, so you can see the most recent sales. Don't sort by like lowest price. That'll sometimes kind of skew your results. For a raw card, you're not looking necessarily for like what's the cheapest comp in the last year. I mean, I get that you would love to buy a card at that price, but maybe you're buying a LP or mint copy of a gold star, and the lowest solds could be a damaged copy a year ago. So that's just obviously not a valid comp. Now let's move on to talking about slabs, graded cards, particularly PSA, but graded cards of any kind. For graded cards, I would definitely recommend Alt. Alt is just an aggregator of recent sales and current listings and things like that, primarily from eBay. So it's not that different really from searching on eBay, but the UI for it and the data that you get for it is just better. But in Alt, there's a few things. So the search function works pretty well, but you can also take a photo of a cert or just of the slab itself, make sure there's no glare by the way, and it'll actually just pull up that card for you. It's gonna default to that PSA 10. When we hit view all here, we can see all the recent transactions. So obviously this card has sold a bunch of times over the last week or so. Pretty stable market price. This 95 here is obviously like particularly low. And so if I'm pricing the card either as a buyer or a seller, I would actually probably ignore the 95. The 95 sale is not really an indication of the card moving down at all. There's just a ton of sales, 120, 130, 116, 118, 125, 137. I price my card at 125. And I think I have it listed on eBay for 125 or 128 or something like that to help myself out with fees. And if someone offered me 120, I'd take it, right? So really, really stable, kind of clear transaction history there. And that's really what makes Alt great. Is it's a really nice UI. You get some good data. The search function works pretty well too. If we go Charizard EX 183 PSA 10, and then we go to sold listings here, we get the exact same thing. That's how I would recommend comping slabs. For Japanese singles, let's say like this Misty's Tears, this band card, I would actually recommend starting on an app called PriceCharting. So I kind of mentioned PriceCharting earlier. PriceCharting doesn't do quite as good a job as Alt at bringing in every recent sale. So what I would recommend when you look in PriceCharting is to just pay attention to the dates here. In the case of this particular card, we're seeing a lot of solds like literally in the last few days. So I would use PriceCharting for this. The thing to pay attention to for ungraded cards like this is that PriceCharting's aggregated highlighted number there is the average. And obviously card condition matters a lot, right? Like this card mint could be $50, but damage could be 15. And so the average when most of the cards being sold are like heavy played or mod played is gonna be $20. So as we look through this, we could see these sales, right? 40, 40, 26, 45, 23, 14. So what I would recommend is basically to just click in to those. It'll take you to the listing and do the same thing we were doing for the eBay solds before. Just check the condition. How does this condition compare for the $15 card versus the $40 card? And obviously compare that against whatever you're looking to buy or sell and try to get it close visually. It's not a perfect science. That's kind of the reality of selling singles. My definition of LP maybe is more loose or more strict than someone else's, but looking at the photos will just really give you a good idea. And again, you want to look at those recent solds. So this works very similarly to Alt, except Alt doesn't have anything for ungraded cards. It's just for graded cards. So PriceCharting is a good replacement, but sometimes when you look up a more rare card, let's say something, let's just go like Gyarados Gold Star. So let's look at like this Japanese Gyarados Gold Star. For one thing, it didn't even pull in like, in Japanese, it's first edition and unlimited, and the unlimited is actually much rarer and more expensive. So even there, like now we don't even know what we're comping. We're probably looking at first editions in most cases. So this average number is really meaningless. And we're seeing like, there was one sale in September, one sale in May. I'm willing to bet this card is sold on eBay way more often and more recently than that. So this is an example where when I look at those dates on the left, I'm just gonna ignore PriceCharting. I'm gonna pull up eBay and do the exact same thing we did with the high-end English, look things up on eBay by most recently ended, last solds, and just kind of start looking at condition to get a good comp. Another thing to know is that TCGPlayer actually just added Japanese cards to their marketplace as of October 2024. So it's very new data. For now, I'm ignoring it completely, but maybe in a few months, TCGPlayer is probably gonna be a great resource for Japanese pricing and sort of market comps and things like that, just like it is for English. But For me personally, I'm gonna wait a few more months before I start using it. There are other apps out there as well. Leonhardt, I think, helped make or sponsored one called Rare Candy. I haven't personally tried it and I've not seen it adopted in my local TCG community. So maybe you check out some of those other apps as well. Just to summarize this again for you, and hopefully I don't have to get asked this question anymore. And if I do, I can just link this video. For raw, ungraded English, modern cards, and lower end vintage, go to TCGPlayer and just make sure you're looking at market price and that you've filtered the correct condition of the card. For high-end vintage cards, definitely we're looking at eBay. Pull up eBay, get in the habit of searching the right keywords, going to the filters, going to sold and completed items. For graded cards and slabs, highly recommend Alt. It's probably gonna be your best way to do this. You can also use PriceCharting, but Alt seems a little bit more consistent. And the ability to use your camera to take a photo as a way of searching for the correct card is really convenient. For Japanese singles, I personally like to use PriceCharting as a starting point, but pay attention to the dates. Make sure that those transactions are relatively recent. If I'm seeing plenty of transactions in the last few weeks, I'll probably just use PriceCharting as a easier way to search through eBay listings and then look at photos of cards just like I would on eBay. All right, hope that was helpful. Never ask me this question again. I appreciate you all. I'm just messing around. Seriously, I know now you're gonna troll me and ask me this question. The comment section of this video is just gonna be, what app do you use? I know, I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it.